Welcome to Ghost House. The first creepy story starts like this. Freya Clydesdale and I grew up together, her house being right next door to mine. Though younger than me by a few years, she is perhaps the smartest person I have ever known and will ever know. One of the clearest memories I have of our time together took place during a particularly strange winter. My dad was away on a fishing trip down in Florida, and a harsh storm hit our area without warning, though the forecast had called for clear skies. Freya's parents had gone out for an anniversary lunch earlier in the day, so she was over at our house. Now trapped by the storm, she, my mother, and I were left to fend for ourselves. Pretty early on, the power went out, but thankfully we had a backup generator. A couple seconds after turning it on, electricity flowed through the house once more. This victory over the storm was short-lived, as the generator died just an hour later. The three of us huddled around my family's fireplace, the scent of warm burning wood wafting through the room. My mother read stories to us as we ate campfire popcorn. I remember her gentle voice as she read, trying to keep our young minds from wandering to a place of fear as vicious winds crashed against the fragile walls of the house. My mother eventually grew tired and passed out on the couch. Freya and I were left with the dying fire. We wrapped up in blankets, found a flashlight in one of the kitchen drawers, and adventured through the dark house. Soon enough, Freya took me to the back door. She shined the flashlight through the thin glass out towards our shed where the generator was. "Come on," she said to me, her voice hushed so as to not stir my mother. "We'll freeze out there," I said. "And besides, what are we going to do?" Freya smiled. She opened the door a crack, which was enough for the wind to blow it wide open and knock us to the ground. Freya giggled, grabbed my hand, and dragged me to my feet. "Come on." Wrapped in our blankets, holding each other's hands, Freya led the way through the snow and icy winds sweeping across the yard. We hadn't put our shoes on, but my feet did not get cold. Freya too was unfazed by the weather. It was as if the storm was in our imagination, made real to our eyes alone. When we got to the shed, she released my hand and kicked piles of snow out from the front of the door, which then swung open freely. Inside, it was cool. The wind didn't rush in like it had back at the house. For whatever reason, the storm chose not to enter. The generator was mounted to the wall at the back of the shed opposite the door. A thick gray wire extended off of it and ran down into the floor, traveling underground into the basement where it was plugged in. Freya looked it over with the flashlight, inspecting every possible angle. She popped open the cap to the gas tank. It was still nearly full. The wiring also appeared intact. Freya turned to me and smiled, her features just visible without the light directly on her. "Want to see something?" she asked. I nodded. Freya moved back towards the door of the shed and flicked on a light switch wired to a single bulb in the center of the ceiling. Nothing happened. She moved back to the generator and switched off the flashlight. For a moment, there were no sound at all. Not even a storm outside could be heard. It was like everything around us had vanished, leaving only the shed and us within. The light came on and the generator sprung to life. Through the shed window, I watched as the lights in my house flickered on as well. Freya stood with her hand held over the machine, her eyes closed. The air around us suddenly felt warm and cozy, as if we were back inside sitting by the fire. Her hand then dropped to her side and her eyes opened. She muffled a cough. Turning to me, she grabbed my arm, and rushed us back out into the blizzard. It was now that I could feel the snow beneath my bare feet. Freya closed the door to the shed and we raced back to the house. My mother was waiting for us, sitting at the kitchen table. She was cloaked in a blanket, her hands clasped around a mug of hot chocolate. "Mom, Mom," I shouted, "Freya fixed the generator." My mother looked at the two of us. Something about her was off. Her eyes were red and her skin pale, the look of a living ghost. "Freya," my mother said calmly, "Nak tu diva. Brook is a money." I looked to Freya, her eyes now completely black. Small twinkles, like starlight, danced in the void. "Rook Dan, Vivi. Dante Moktai," replied Freya, in an equally calm voice. My mother stood slowly, seeming to struggle a bit. She knelt before me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Noah," her eyes now filled with tears, "never forget how much I love you. And never forget that I will always love you." I don't know why, but I was unable to say anything in response. I wasn't angry, sad, or anything. No emotion. I just was. She stood and took Freya's hand. "One day Viviaku." Freya smiled at me, she seemed so sad and happy at the same time. "I shall see you again when stars sing, Noah." The two of them walked to the front door and exited the house, out into the freezing cold. I ran to the doorway and caught one last glimpse of them before they faded into the dark of the storm. Soon after the snow subsided, Freya's parents pulled in next door. What followed was an utter disaster. Freya's parents accused my mother of abducting her. My father was ferocious in defending his beloved wife. For some reason, I had stopped viewing her as my parent. I didn't know who she was anymore, but this hadn't made me angry, hateful, or indifferent. I just stopped thinking she was ever really my mother to begin with, firm in my belief that her and Freya were something more. I didn't understand it at the time, but this strange event would affect the course of the rest of my life. Years went by. Nothing ever came of my mother or my best friend, Freya. My father had turned to drinking for a long time until he finally died of heart complications. Being of legal age, I was on my own after that. I packed up my things and left my hometown. Too many soured memories. Too few answers. In my grief over my father's death, I took it upon myself to find out what had happened on that stormy day so many years ago. Through pure perseverance, I educated myself fiercely. I studied numerous languages and cultures and investigated every rumor I could find pertaining to similar phenomena. I was led to one dead end after the other. One night, as I sat drinking on the balcony of my new apartment, a knock came at my door. Pulling myself into a standing position, careful as to not fall over, I ventured back into my apartment to see who it was that wanted to see me so late. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by the sight of a tall man with gray bushy eyebrows and a full, unkempt beard. His eyes were like embers plucked straight from a dying fire. He smelled of the ocean and freshly trimmed grass. His eyelids drooped a bit, as if overly tired. Noah Franklin Everett. His voice was deep and in an accent I couldn't quite place. "Yeah?" I managed to say, probably a little too loudly. The stranger looked me up and down, and then peered over my shoulder into the apartment. "You are summoned. You must come with me at once." He placed a large hand on my head. "You are required sober, Noah Franklin Everett." As soon as he finished his statement, my drunken dizziness left me, along with the depressing thoughts of my father and failed attempts to understand the day that haunted me so. "How did you come?" He was already making his way to the complex's old, rickety elevator. Like a dog being lured with the promise of a treat, I followed, bewildered. The mystery man led me down and out of the building into the cool night air. I kept his pace, making every turn he did, curious as to where we would end up. Eventually, he stopped in front of a small corner pub. Nobody was going in or coming out. The windows were fogged up, only a faint bit of light visible through them. The doors were old and blue with some paint worn off in spots. It didn't fit in with the modern look of the rest of the strip. The man nudged me to enter. I knew I should have been frightened by the whole ordeal, but I wasn't. Whatever the man did earlier had calmed me to the core. I gave the place a final once-over and then made my way in. Suddenly, I was in an open field beneath a full moon. The sky was so clear, part of the Milky Way was visible, a swirling vortex of constellations. On the ground in front of me was a blanket, laid out on the grass. Confused, I turned around to leave, but the doors were gone. My calmness was replaced with fear, creeping through me like a snake slithering along the underbrush, preparing to attack its prey. "Hello, Noah." I spun around. A man, similar in appearance to the last one, was now standing at the other side of the blanket. Unlike the first man, this one's eyes were white like snow, and his hair, brows, and beard were the color of fire. "Many years ago, you knew a girl named Freya Clydesdale, did you not?" Shaking, I nodded my head. "Good." With a flick of his hand, the blanket leapt up from the ground and coiled around me like a boa. The snake had struck. The blanket's grip became tighter until I fell to the ground. The man with fiery hair stood over me. It was then that I realized he didn't have hair at all. Atop his head and upon his face were actual, burning flames. I tried to scream, but the air in my lungs was nowhere to be found. "You will tell me where Freya Clydesdale is. Do this, and I will grant you a swift death. Refuse, and I will peel the skin from your body and feast on your meat until only the bone is left. Then, I will remake you and start again. Understand?" A trickle of blood rolled down the side of my face from the corner of my mouth as I tried my best to nod. "Good." The blanket constricting me loosened just enough for me to suck in a fraction of the oxygen I was used to breathing. "Talk, Noah Franklin Everett." My voice was shaky and weak. "I don't know. I never found out," I managed. The man with hair of fire squinted angrily down at me. "I swear. I don't know." "That's too bad," replied the man. "Maybe you'll be more forthcoming the next time around." Wait. Wait. I screamed, but there was no stopping him now. 4 large stakes materialized in my hands and feet, spreading me out on the ground like an animal for slaughter. The fiery man pulled out a large knife and sliced into my skin. Each piece he cut off made a horrendous, wet noise as it slid from his mouth to his stomach. The night air was soon filled with the sound of my screaming. The man then dropped the knife and dug into my flesh and muscles with his bare teeth. He tore out my throat to silence my audible agony. My eyes to leave my pain and darkness. My nose to hide the scent of my flesh and blood on his breath. I felt the shattering of bone as he pulled my spine from my back. He cracked my skull open with a rock and scooped out my brain matter like it was a delicacy. How was I not dead? Why was I not dead? When all that was left was my bones, as promised, the man resurrected my previous form. I felt everything grow back in a matter of seconds. Bones snapping into place, fractures healing, my flesh and organs manifesting inside me. Again, he asked, "Where is Freya Clydesdale?" Knowing nothing I could say would please this monster, I presented him with no answer. "Fine. We'll try again." This time, he tore off a leg and an arm, devouring them as he knelt over me. He used them like fleshy goblets, pouring my blood over his tongue. My eyes rolled back as I writhed in pain. I noticed the stars perched high in the night sky. This is when she appeared. I knew it was her. It could be no one else. High above me, descending like snow to the ground, a now-grown Freya approached. Her hair danced around her, gravity seemingly unable to touch it. With her came a hum. Low at first, but gradually it grew louder and higher in pitch. The stars became brighter. It was as if they had begun to sing in harmony with one another, a tune not just heard, but seen. The man craned his neck back, saw Freya, and stood up to meet her, dropping my half-eaten limbs to the ground. Freya landed gently beside me. She was tall now. Just as tall as the bloodthirsty man. She was also visually breathtaking. She looked so beautiful and full of life. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Neither could the man. He looked her over, his eyes crazed and longing. In a flash, he grabbed his knife, raced to her position, and held the blade to her neck, drawing a single drop of blood that rolled down her skin, vanishing beneath the bosom of her white gown. Her expression had been plain, but it now turned to anger as she opened her mouth to speak. "For this, old friend, you must die." Her hand shot out and wrapped around his face. His fire was extinguished as he dropped his dagger. His skin then began to melt and drip to the ground. He let out a wail so loud, I genuinely thought my eardrums might burst. But the stars became brighter, and their tune, louder. The shrieks of a dying man yielded to the sheer force of their melody. The man then ignited in a fit of white flames. Soon after, all became white. I could hear nothing, see nothing. The universe had become a blank sheet of paper. When my vision returned, blurry, I was in a hospital bed. Dressing covered the wounds of my missing leg and arm. Fluids were being pumped into me through tubes attached to several machines and devices. The other beds in the room were empty, and all was quiet. After a moment or two, the sound of the machines broke through the silence, and a horrible headache ruled within the confines of my skull, rattling my brain like a roller coaster. Hours must have gone by before a nurse came in to check on me. "Oh!" she exclaimed cheerily. "You're awake." She checked the various readings from the machines I was attached to. Where am I?" My voice was shaky, and my throat felt as if I had consumed molten metal. "You are very lucky. This hospital has the best doctors in the world." The nurse carried on with checking my readings. "But this place, what is it called?" The nurse smiled. "You're in the curious cases ward. This is the end of the story, now let's move on to the next one." Kenneth Mathers loved beauty. He adored the very aspects that beauty presented. Beauty was loved by all. Beauty was welcomed in every gathering, celebrated by the people and requested in all circles. Beauty was perfection, something that Kenneth valued and swore to protect with his life. Beauty was Kenneth's duty, a duty that he intended to carry out. However, the Beast had other ideas. The Beast had been stalking Beauty for years, right out in plain sight. Kenneth had tried to tell others about it, had tried to point out the Beast. "We're getting ahead of ourselves though, aren't we?" Kenneth was in his mid-30s these days, and had been aware of the Beast and his evil, wicked attacks on Beauty since a young age. Perhaps it first showed itself to Kenneth when he was in the 2nd or 3rd grade. Oddly enough, Beauty had entered his life around the same time as the Beast. Both were very close acquaintances. It was Kenneth's classmates that first made him aware of the Beast, for they saw him too. They pointed him out to Kenneth one day, explaining in small detail what the beast looked like, and what his impact on his victims' lives caused. They whispered about the beast around Kenneth from time to time. It was an ugly fiend to be sure, something to avoid. That same year, Kenneth became aware of Beauty, and was quickly made aware that Beauty would always be hunted and terrorized by the beast. As years went by, Kenneth was forced to stand witness as the beast continued his attacks. Sometimes they were minor, just some annoyance or another intended to detract away from Beauty's ability to live and be happy. Other times, the beast's attacks were direct and vicious, causing weeks of damage. Kenneth watched, day after day, week after week, year after year as the beast continued to rampage and wreak havoc on Beauty. Kenneth had tried many times to point out the beast. He tried to tell his mother about it, to express the sheer terror that the beast imposed on Beauty. His mother would reply the same each time, that Kenneth was imagining all of these things, that there was no beast. Kenneth had photographs of it though, plenty of them. The beast was pale, it had crooked teeth and matted hair. It looked so weak, so pitiful, yet it could cause nothing but pain and torture to poor Beauty. Kenneth truly hated that damned evil bastard. Yet, despite his best efforts, he could not defeat him. He tried to show his photos to others, but they pretended as though they could not see the beast. They would chuckle and tell Kenneth that he was being ridiculous. Life continued and Kenneth's hatred of the beast evolved into something deeper and darker with each passing year. Beauty was becoming weaker, more distressed, begging Kenneth for help. Yet no help seemed to come. Kenneth married the love of his life, hoping that she could dispel the influence of the beast. For a while that worked well, the beast and his constant harassment of Beauty slowed for a time. However, one day, as Kenneth was driving to work, he looked into his rearview mirror and caught sight of the beast. It was just there for a second, but he knew it when he saw it. It was out there, stalking yet again. A year later and the beast was back to his old tricks. Kenneth tried so hard to get his wife to see the beast. He pointed it out, screamed at her to notice it, begged her to see what he saw almost every single day. She became distressed because she felt that his obsession with the beast was becoming dangerous. She tried to reassure him time and time again that there was no beast, yet Kenneth could not look away from it. As he grew older, it seemed to grow in power, attacking Beauty directly and without mercy. Eventually his wife left. She simply could not tolerate his obsession with the beast any longer. He saw it almost everywhere, and would often fly into a rage when no one else, including his wife, would acknowledge it. He hated the beast. He had a photograph of it that he took recently. He sat alone in his home studying it, falling deeper and deeper into his intense hatred of the monster. It was that very day that he decided to confront the beast once and for all, to end its evil games and to rescue Beauty once and for all. He was in his own home, turning towards his bedroom when he caught sight of the beast. The bastard thing was right there, invading his most private of sanctuary. It was staring at him, daring him to make a move against it. However, the beast had made one fatal mistake, it had allowed itself to be cornered. Kenneth reached for the nearest weapon he could grab, a hammer, and advanced on the beast without fear. "I fucking hate you!" Kenneth screamed as he walked up to it. The beast refused to back down, it stood its ground, inviting Kenneth to do his worst. It was mocking him as always. "I hate everything about you, I hate your fucking crooked teeth. Why can't they be straight, why can't they look like everyone else's? Normal people have straight fucking teeth." Kenneth attacked the beast with the hammer, smashing its teeth, watching its mouth bleed. It felt amazing. For so many years Kenneth had wanted to go after this thing, this creature that lived only to destroy the innocent Beauty. In his glorious rage, he simply couldn't understand why he'd waited so long. Best of all, he could tell the beast was feeling pain, all the pain it had inflicted, coming back to it with interest. "I hate your fucking hair. Your hair is never right. Other people, normal people, comb their hair the way they want. You piece of shit, you have to be difficult all the fucking time, don't you?" Kenneth dropped the hammer and grabbed the wounded beast's hair and began to rip it out in great handfuls. The pain registering on the beast's face was a thing of triumph. All the years that Kenneth had to endure this fucker's abuse of Beauty, and now it was its turn to feel that agony. Kenneth ripped the beast's hair out until there was nothing left but a few strands and a bloody scalp. Kenneth was a warrior, Kenneth was invincible, and the beast was finally being brought to justice. "Let's see that scrawny little body of yours, shall we? Why can't you be like everyone else? Why can't you just be like everyone fucking else? Do you like being an ugly piece of shit? Is that it? Do you enjoy what you do to Beauty? Do you like the pain you inflict? Is this fun for you?" Kenneth looked around and saw a pair of sharp scissors on his bathroom sink. Shears, yes, perfect, used for cutting hair. They were sharp as razors. Of course, since Kenneth relieved the beast of his disgraceful excuse for a head of hair, he found another purpose for them. He began to cut the beast's arms, slicing into the small biceps that never developed muscle or tone. The agony on the beast's face was heavenly to Kenneth's eyes. This moment, the moment of finally moving against the beast, finally applying the payback that the beast deserved, sent Kenneth into a spinning cyclone of bliss. He found alive for the first time since the beast first introduced itself into his life. Kenneth had to share this with his wife. She was only a few blocks away, at her mother's house. One phone call and she could be over in a matter of minutes. Finally, he could prove to her that he wasn't crazy. He had the beast, right in front of him, wounded and bleeding. She would see it finally, she would take him back, and Beauty, his sworn charge, would finally be safe. "Hello?" his wife answered. "I've finally captured the beast. I am going to kill the fucker right here. Come home and see it. Come home and witness the victory of Beauty." "Ken, are you okay? What did you do?" "Come home, baby, come home and see for yourself, please, I love you. There is a lot of blood though, this thing bleeds after all, so, don't freak out, okay?" He was going to say more, but he looked towards his prey and saw that it was on its feet and smiling. The fucker had the nerve to still grin, just like in all those photos that Kenneth had taken. It was still making a mockery of him. Beauty was still in danger. Kenneth hung up the phone. He knew this was going to take more drastic measures. He ran into his bedroom and quickly rummaged through his closet. That's when he found what he wanted. His Colt Python revolver, fully loaded with beast-slaying glory. "Hey fucker, still smiling?" Kenneth screamed as he turned around. The beast had followed him. It was in his bedroom, standing against the wall, smiling and daring him to make another move. It was so hideous, so evil. "You've hunted for your last day, beast, no more. 33 fucking years of you, every day. You don't even care, do you?" The beast did not respond, but only stood there, smiling. "You don't know what you've put Beauty through, what you've put me through, do you? Every fucking day, you're always there, reminding us just how weak we are, reminding us that we can never be like everybody fucking else. You don't care, do you? You don't give a damn? Well, enough is enough, you don't control me anymore." Kenneth aimed the gun at the beast's head and fired one shot. He was too close to miss, and the beast was no more. Sharon Mathers arrived to the house with 2 police officers 20 minutes later. She had become concerned that her husband was unstable, based on the comments he had made on that last phone call. She didn't know what he intended to do, but she didn't want to confront him alone. The police entered first with their pistols drawn. They were in the house for about 15 minutes when they came out and beckoned Sharon to enter. They seemed pale. Kenneth Mathers was lying on his bedroom floor, in front of a full-length mirror, apparently the victim of suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He had mutilated himself quite badly as well. The beast lives within us all. It stalks our sense of beauty without mercy. It thrives on our own pain and self-hatred. Some of us learn how to combat the beast, others learn to ignore it. For a very select few of us, it never really appears as much of a threat. For some though, it is a constant presence, a true beast to which there is no means to hide or escape.